So I think this is recording. And it is Thanksgiving Day here in the United States. You're getting a chance to look at my apartment. Here it is. See these things up here? These cool things on the ceiling. I bought those in Delhi in India last summer. Cool, huh? Love those things. Anyway, this is my apartment. Here it is. It's a beautiful place. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about, the United States and democracy and things like that. Because I think there's something really challenging about what's happening in this country and really in the world. Here's the outside of my apartment. There's my little red car and Berta's car next to it. Berta lives upstairs and I live down here. So let's walk over here. We'll find a chair to sit in. This is a nice little setting over here. Check that out. See? That's where we're going, to that chair right there. But on our way, we'll show you a little bit about our garden space. Yeah, so we're out here in Glorieta, New Mexico, which is about 20 miles outside of Santa Fe. There's our gardens. And there's our prayer flags from Project Tibet here in New Mexico. And I thought it'd be kind of cool to sit and just talk a little bit about, I almost fell down sitting down in that chair, to talk a little bit about the U.S. and democracy. I cut myself doing dishes just a minute ago, so hopefully it won't bleed too much. But, and that's a little bright in my eyes. So let's turn it this way. How about that? That's better. Okay, so see, it's tricky about democracy. It's a participative process. And I first heard that from Harry Chapin years ago when he used to come and do benefit concerts for the Flint Voice newspaper that I worked on with Michael Moore. So there's a name drop for you. My old friend Michael. And Harry was really adamant that democracy is participative. And, in all those years since, it's been like 40 years or, 35 years, something like that, since hearing Harry say that. I've seen the same thing, that in order to have democracy work, which means culture work, I think, and excuse me. Oh boy. To have culture work and have society work, that what it requires of us is to look around and see where it is that our passion and us coming alive about what it is that we want to do in the world and how we want to contribute, that we do that. We engage that. And we don't sit around and gripe and moan and, blame other people and all of that. It's participatory. And it is messy. If you just think back here in the United States about how messy this nearly ridiculous presidential campaign was, it was embarrassing and foolish and childish. I mean, it was everything that we don't think presidential elections are going to contain. It's like, in some ways, the worst of who we are as people here in the United States, and maybe in the world. Maybe it's shared in the world. I don't know. I've watched politics in India and in Europe, and now a little bit I'm starting to pay attention to Sri Lanka because there's some possibilities of going there to do some Gandhian work in the next 2 years. And politics is messy. And participative democracy is messy. And, we as human beings are messy and conflicted and paradoxical. And I mean, I have so much desire in my life, for instance, to to be part of a spiritual community that activates itself and like really goes for the process of creating in our own daily lives the very values and actions and practices and living philosophies that I treasure so much in the world. I have so many friends who treasure too. And I have so much value for that. And sometimes, paradoxically, I just want to sit and watch a football game and drink a beer and not worry about the world or, anything else. And I have failed and made mistakes and, done hurtful things to people. And for all those I've hurt, by the way, I apologize. I'm really sorry. And I landed a few years ago on a basic kind of core tenet for myself. And it was freeing and got me loose from all the guilt and shame and kind of the cycle of that. The cycle of guilt and shame is that you feel guilty and shameful and you find some way to make up for it and you go about your life for a little while and then it just draws you right back in again and you go ahead and do more stuff that's fills you with guilt and shame and that's hurtful to other people. It's a crazy cycle. And, you folks who maybe are listening to this who have struggled with addictions, you know what I'm talking about. But the powerful thing about being paradoxical is that I came to the conclusion that I just am who I am. I make the amends I can make. I'm not a perfect human being by any means. I'm as messy as democracy is. And there it is. And sue me or something if you don't like it. But whatever, we're all messy. And I'm one of the messiest, I'm sure. And that's what democracy is about taking, like in our country, 350 million people and trying to make sense of that mess that 350 million people create, right? Like it's a lot of mess. And in the thrill of that and in the beauty of that and the disgusting troubles that come from that. This past week there were people gathered Saturday, I think, in Washington saying Heil Hitler, Heil Victory or whatever to the speakers who were talking about white nationalism coming to power and how this is a white country and it's our destiny as white people to sweep across the world and control everything and the most ludicrous, hateful, foolish, stupid way of thinking about who any people are. And yet, that's America. Our country was built on racism, on slavery, and on genocide for the people who lived here before us. We slaughtered them. We still have policies in our country to degrade them and keep them in their place. We still have policies in our country to degrade the descendants of the slaves and keep them in their place. It's still practiced. And these people who think that somehow with Mr. Trump being elected president, that somehow that gives them a new voice for their racist, bigoted ideas and thoughts about somehow one person, one group of people are better than other groups of people. It's just more foolishness and more messiness in this thing we call democracy. What I'm wondering about, I woke up this morning, believe it or not, wondering about this, is how do we make ourselves worthy of democracy? How do we make ourselves good enough for democracy to work? And in that process, from a spiritual perspective, how is it that we live in our richest, thickest, most heartfelt spiritual values as people so that we can be worthy of democracy? Because I actually think the idea that a people can rule themselves through institutions and processes that we put into place. It's such a revolutionary idea. After, thousands and thousands of years of rule by gangsters who rose to power because they killed everybody in front of them. Today, even countries like Saudi Arabia, the people there, the poor people there, are held in place by the gangsters who got a hold of the wealth and enough people with guns to stop anybody from revolting. You may have noticed that they didn't have an Arab Spring in Saudi Arabia, and there's no accident there that that occurred in that way without that happening. And it happens in our country too. I mean, the Bush family rose to power through gangsterism and covert operations that they put into place. There's a lot of evidence about these things. And that's how they stay in power. That's how these elites stay in power. That's how the 1% in the world stays in power. They're just gangsters. They just happen to own the guns. That's all. And they've built the laws and the structures and the institutions around some fictional kinds of values that say this is good, and it's better that we have NAFTA, for instance, or a Trans-Pacific Partnership, so that the multinationals can do their business across the world without anybody getting in the way of that. How we participate in these kinds of institutional moves and structures in our countries, both here and abroad, is really, really important, because you don't have to get involved in politics to live out those spiritual values that you hold so dear. You can just do what you want to do in your own home, in your own community, without having to resort to running for office or being a member of the Republican or Democratic Party. And after this last presidential election here in the U.S., I think being involved in the Democratic or Republican Party is like a move of craziness. It's just like, why would you do that at this point? They're both like so ridiculously, foolishly led and corrupt, and like, why do that? Gandhi always said, like, don't worry about politics, don't run for office, serve the people, create what it is that you're here to create. Go about doing what it is that your heart is calling you to do. Find a way to live fully and go do that. So I started off this little talk 13 minutes ago talking about participative democracy. And I think in order to be worthy of democracy, because it's a very high calling, democracy is, in order to be worthy of democracy, we have to make ourselves be those democratic principles. We have to honor even all these people that I've just badmouthed. We have to honor them, that they have their own invested ideas and values and their own spiritual beliefs. And in that honoring, what we can do is connect with them. Like, half of my family voted differently than I voted in this election. Half of my family. And I was appalled. I thought, like, who could even vote for that guy? Like, how could you even vote for that guy? But half of my family did. And I'm just so curious, not judgmental, but just really, really curious how they did that. Like, what was it about their thinking that allowed them to do that? And somehow this multi-billionaire guy was a man of the people. It's just, I don't get it. And I want to get it. I really want to get it, because I know that in our country, here in the U.S., there's a huge amount of people who believe that about him and who are still believing it. Now, I'm cheering for him to, like, do really, really cool things as a president. But what I'm looking to for myself is finding a way to live in a daily manner with community-based practices, my friendships, my relationships, that really live out those touchstone values of mine. That all people are created equal. And therefore are endowed with sacred rights that are not able to be taken away from them by any government, by any so-called sovereign king or queen or anybody like that. They are unalienable rights. And that some of those rights are the right to life and to liberty and to the pursuit of happiness. I believe in those really strongly. I believe in that idea really, really strongly. And I want you to really consider, how is it that you're going to live your pursuit of happiness? How is it that you're going to live your liberty? And how is it that you're going to be free? Free in your thinking, free to choose as you wish, free to do what you wish in your life as long as it's not hurting somebody else. How are you going to do that? In my spiritual coaching practice, when I work with clients from all over the world, we do it over the phone or over Skype. This is what we're focusing on. How to bring those wonderful qualities of who we are as a person, to find them and grab them and hold them and then live them, express them in everything that we do, from our work to our relationships to our personal practices. And to me, that's what participative democracy is all about, is living our full life to the very best of our ability. I'm going to start posting these kind of videos, so I'll see you next time. And if you have any thoughts, feel free to comment right down below here. I'd appreciate your thoughts and your ideas and what you think about what I've said. Take care, and for those here in the U.S., happy Thanksgiving. Bye-bye.